musicians. Musicians do have that kind of courage. They have to collaborate with other people. They have to reach out for talents, because if I can't find a bass player, then I've got to go with what I have, and I've got to work around that. So it's sort of like pulling the components together. So it's good to have a list of people that you can collaborate with. It's good to not only have that, but to have the courage to make sure that you reach out to others and trust your own musicianship. That's another thing, to be able to work, and your ability to be accommodating as a director, as a musician, as a singer, what have you. Those are very important, to be accommodating to others when you are looking for a strong collaboration.
I think as all of the arts have value individually, when you put them together, there is just something that goes so beyond each one of them. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt that with any collaboration that I've done, any joining together, and I've done that a good bit, as you said, our individual capabilities are fine, and what we do individually is fine, and yet when we come together, we create something that's so much more than that. And I think music, all of the arts demonstrate that.
Yeah, that synergy, the synergy of the art.
Yeah, and all of the arts demonstrate that. Mm-hmm. You can have a fine actor, but if you have 3 and 5 and 12 fine actors, you have so much more than mm-hmm. one. Mm-hmm. And I think music and, well, all of the arts really, really demonstrate that. And mm-hmm. it was a pleasure to be doing that with you. It was mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
An honor to be doing that with you. I'm just very grateful that we could collaborate and collaborate as easily as we did.
Yeah, we found those magic moments. We found them in rehearsals and performance, what have you. We found those, as I call them, magic moments.
Yeah, they are just, they are magical. Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to go into our panel discussion. These are independent artists that we'll be talking with today. And again, I encourage you to use that QR code to get their bio information, because they're very talented people. First, we have, just forgive me if I don't do your name right, but I just charge it to my head, not my heart. Wilfredo Valladares Lara. Okay. We have Terry Koger. We have Garrett Matthews. And we have Nefertari Razak. So we're going to jump right into it. So, first of all, we live in some very interesting times, as you know, post-pandemic, social media culture, just a lot of different things in the last 10 years. We've seen our world just change so much. Have you seen, as an artist, have you seen a shift in the way that you feel like people are expressing their art? And if you have, what are some examples? And pull the mic to you so they can hear you, maybe a little closer so they can hear you, or take it off. Anybody can answer, but just don't all answer at once, please.
I would say yes, definitely. The amazing thing that I've seen is I grew up hearing, you always have to have a backup plan, and that's very important. You can't just be an artist. You need something that's going to feed you. But there are artists, actual painters, there are dancers, there are people making money off of their art and making a profound amount of money. And it's beautiful to watch. I've literally been following this beautiful, amazing woman. She's based in North Carolina. She's an artist, a painter. And she started, from what I've seen from her story, she was working minimum wage in North Carolina. She was doing that, and she wasn't able to pay, her way. And everything was very hard financially. She got back into her artwork, and now the woman is making $15,000 off of one of her paintings. You know, she has multiple studios, she has grand events, she has celebrities reaching out to her for her paintings that she's selling copies of, but also, you know, original prints. And it's beautiful to be able to see an appreciation for that type of art while the people are still alive, you know, to see it. So that's great.
Go ahead.
I would say that something that I've definitely seen, especially post-pandemic, is a lot more online AI, artificial intelligence, or AR, augmented reality kind of performance. We see things now that we have not only TikTok, where you have a much more quick, immediate entertainment, under 3-minute sort of structure, but now you're incorporating art worlds that exist in their own plane of space that have an even more incredible way of connecting with people all across the world. You see it in performance, you see it in every art form, like you see online sculptures. And so it is really interesting, like if you have any kind of virtual headset, you can exhibit, there's museums that are doing new exhibits where those are incorporated. It's a wild world out here.
I think that the pandemic created a lot of creativity during the pandemic and much more after the pandemic. I was just thinking about my son, who's a singer, and he created a quarantine karaoke where he would have people call in and request songs, and he would play them, whatever. Like he might have a theme of Disney, and you would call in, and he had his Venmo and his Cash App, so people would send him money, and that kept him afloat throughout the pandemic.
Wow.
But that was just one way to keep him, you know, sane during that time because he couldn't perform. I was lucky enough to be able to teach through Zoom. A lot of teachers I know did not like Zoom. They did not like teaching on, especially teaching a musical instrument. It's very difficult to navigate what's going on when you don't have hands-on, the experience of having hands-on right there to show a student what to do and what not to do. But I loved it because it gave me a chance to really test my ear to say, all right, what would produce that sound that he just made? And it really enabled me to learn a lot from that experience of listening to what was going on. So I think after the pandemic was over, I'm starting to see a lot of more people that were basically frozen during that period because some people didn't come out, they didn't do anything, they didn't teach, and for that whole period. So, but now I'm seeing a lot more creativity after the fact.
Yeah, for me, I think definitely the pandemic created a huge impact into the art world. Also in the educational field too, like, you know, teaching art during the pandemic was a very difficult time for professors to reinvent themselves. But I think that artists naturally, we are fortunate that we adapt quickly, and the creativity part of us allow us to really shift in situations like that. So I think that you know, the recovery has been impressive in terms of the artist community, and then just to highlight that the organizations that are supporting artists also were proactive in that approach to support artists during those times. Yeah.
Thank you. This kind of piggybacks off of some of what Ruby was talking about earlier, but as an artist, do you feel like it's challenging, or do you feel like you're truly represented, that you can always go somewhere and have an opportunity? Or is it challenging? Has it gotten better? What are your thoughts about that?
I think there are different challenges. Initially, everybody was trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I thought about this collaboration I had with a friend of mine that's a quilter, and we talked, and we decided to have like a mini convention, and we did a Jazz It Up challenge where all these quilters made quilts based on the Jazz It Up theme. So we had a collaboration with the Harriet Tubman Museum in Cambridge. So we had music, my quintet performed, we had the quilters, you know, present their quilts, and it turned into a nice affair. We didn't have the attendance that we might have had pre or after COVID, but it was still the fact that we just were determined to do something as a collaboration, and it was a very, very nice event, very nice event.
I can piggyback off of that just to say that what I've seen the difference of is people aren't waiting for projects. They are greenlighting their own. And that's where the creativity comes in. I've never heard of give me the title again, the karaoke.
Quarantine.
Quarantine karaoke. That's creative. That's definitely creative, and I think that we're continuing to next level our ideas and our beliefs, and especially as creatives, we have an audacity to do things that haven't been done, do things that we haven't seen put before us, and that's very scary territory because it's uncharted territory. But it's awesome to be amongst other creatives that are like, oh, you're about to do that? Oh, I'd love to see it happen. How can I help? You know, it's different when I know that Alicia, I think the very first speaker, she was talking about get you non-creative friends, and that's important too. But to be able to also surround yourself with creatives, it helps to push the needle even further.
And to also piggyback off of that, I think a change of mindset of working laterally and not working vertically. And so instead of constantly looking up, looking for what my next step, my next goal, my next who can I meet that I want to meet, who's already doing the thing, and instead of looking around you already, who you know, who share similar goals and pathways, who might not be like anywhere near any kind of goal, but you see that finish line, even if it's like a pipe dream, it's something to work towards together. And I know that I see a change in all of us are already in hustle culture. All of us are already hustling. So why hustle at something that should be something that is life-giving and life-affirming? And I think that's a mindset that I've noticed shift in the last few years.
Yeah, my observation is that obviously the pandemic amplified the equity, the inclusion, the accessibility, and the arts. So we know that during that time we learned so much about each other, about organizations, what we were doing wrong, what we needed to improve. So I think that there is a lot of more work to do in terms of the arts. But I think that we are heading in the right direction. My thing is that this should be cemented in the visions and missions of organizations and colleges and universities as well. Because if we don't do that, then there's never going to be a real change. Right. But I think there's a lot of more work to do.
Thank you so much. So you guys kind of took away one of my questions, because I was going to ask you, about your thoughts on creating opportunities for yourselves as opposed to waiting on opportunities to come to you. So you guys kind of touched on that already. So just looking at the way things are, as opposed to maybe when you started in your art, do you feel like now that you have more of a goal or a focus or a way that you want to express yourself that might be different than it was, a few years ago? Do you feel like this is the type of artist that I now want to be known as, seen as, or does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, I don't need to keep going first, so why not?
Go ahead. Ladies first.
Yes, that dwindling down, I think, allows you to increase so much because you're able to focus in on what you want to do. So, but it's funny because we talked earlier, also referencing someone earlier who was mentioning, as an artist, we don't have, now we're in a space where we don't feel like we have to do just one thing. Like for me, I'm a storyteller, and that storytelling shows up in so many different ways. I'm an actor. I've been on this stage, which is awesome. Thank you to Angela and the Chesapeake Art Center. I'm a spoken word artist. I write memoirs. I help CEOs and what I love to call impactful truth tellers compose their memoirs. And for me, that is all storytelling. For me, it is something that I'm great at in each one of those things. For my goal of growing within acting, I can focus in on a certain type of character or story or life that I want to be strong at performing. And then when it comes to storytelling and memoirs, I can focus in on my Black and brown people whose voices have been silenced. So I can have my different areas within my main focus of storytelling, and then multiple areas, but I focus in on how I show up and the talents that I have in order to strengthen each way in which I provide more.
Beautiful. Anybody else?
In terms of my own, I guess, professional practice as an artist, or the journey that I guess I'm taking, nothing, I mean, I continue to do the journey that I believe that I am developing, but I think, you know, with these new times that we're living in, I beginning to think that, you know, like my concept of time is a little different. So, and at the same time, I am a little more intentional in my messaging in terms of what I'm creating within my art, or what I want to say, what I want to be advocating for in terms of, you know, reaching out to those communities that need that support.
I think I'm always trying to challenge myself and not put myself in one box. Try to do things that, like I mentioned, the quilting project, something that had never been done before. But it all came because of dialogue with my friend. And you know, I'm always talking to people about, you know, things other than music. And whenever I can fuse the 2 or 3 things together, it makes me happy, because these are things that normally would not happen. So I try to be as creative as I can and bring others that are creative to present something that's new and exciting for the public to experience.
I think a mindset that I keep in mind is that while we use the metaphor of seats at the table, when people aren't invited to sit at the table, they are just sitting back being, oh bummer, they're creating their own table at the same time. So if you're also focusing on one table for too long, why? You need to also think about all the other tables that exist especially in this country. We do not live in a homogenous state. We do not live in a homogenous country whatsoever. So to diversify your goals is something that I would say is something that I also have been trying to live. Because it is easy to get that pipeline dream and get that laser focus, put the blinders up and full-fledged forward go. You miss out so much. And that's where the art lives.
Yes.
And so it's that mindfulness and keeping that mindfulness open.
So this is a question that you may have already done, and I think your name, Terry, you've kind of expressed that. But what have you done, or what will you do, or what would you like to do to engage another audience that you wouldn't have normally engaged before? Now that we're trying to be more inclusive and we're trying to cross boundaries, we're trying to remove barriers, what have you done, or what would you do to engage another audience that you wouldn't normally engage?
I'll take that one.
Okay.
Well, I'm primarily a jazz musician, and a lot of times I'll ask someone, do you like jazz music? And they might say, no, I don't like it. And then I'll say, well, why don't you like it? And most of the time I find out that they really haven't been exposed to it. So I think it's my job at that point to expose them, educate them about the music. So we have such a rich history. It was a music born here in America, and we have such a rich history. Music's about 100 years old, but it's through so many different phases of music that, you know, so it's a lot to capture. So it's not just one style. We have bebop, we have swing, we have big band, we have electronic fusion. There's so many different aspects to the music. So my thing is trying to create new audiences, people that aren't familiar. And I haven't met anybody yet that's been exposed that said, I still don't like it. I just haven't found that person. So I'm always trying to, trying to find new audiences and also expose other people. And also young audiences, because what I'm finding now is most people I play for are older than me a lot of times. Usually the ones that are younger are not too much younger than me. So I want to bridge that gap of younger folks to be exposed also.
Anybody else?
I would say, for me, it's listening. Listening is so big, and so if I'm doing it as an actor, Right now, I'm actually in a production called Retha's First March with Amazing Theater, and I'm playing a female cop during Black Lives Matter movement. And so it's different. I've never played law enforcement before, though I attended the High School for Law Enforcement and Public Safety in New York. So I'm literally going back to who I was in high school, watching NYPD always being around my school. I'm watching the officers inside and the muster drills that we did. And it's like I'm watching them and listening, even though it was in the past. And so when I'm doing my memoirs now as a ghostwriter, I'm listening to people who are older than me, and they've lived lives or lived certain experiences. And many of them may be my age as well too, but they've lived certain experiences that I know nothing about. But because I'm listening to them, I get to this next level of what Viola Davis says is honoring a life. You know, a life once lived, even if that was just only a chapter of their life, to be able to listen and understand it. I may not, just like Mr. Darrell Davis amazingly said today, I may not agree with what you are saying, but I will respect it. And to amplify it in some sense will allow us to be so changed and so much better than who we are already.
Yeah, just this summer, I had an opportunity to work with a student that was visibly impaired. And so obviously I don't have a background on teaching, a student with that level of disability. So I took the challenge, and we worked together through 3 weeks, and I found myself learning so much, and then also thinking about that I have been making sculptures for so long, and I have never thought about that perspective. So now I am in that sort of quest to keep learning more about it, and to see how my work is going to be somehow connecting that perspective.
Okay. Anything else? Anything else? So, unfortunately, we are at the end of the day. I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to wrap it up for us. And this would be a quick one. But I just want to know, do you have an artist role model, and who is that? And very quickly, why?
I have one. He's an artist role model. He's a close personal friend of mine. I met him at a very interesting stage of his career. He's a culinary historian, author. Michael Twitty wrote The Cooking Gene, and just recently The Kosher Soul. And I became friends with him when his mother had just recently passed away. He was working on his book. He works with tracing American foodways through the African slave trade, the Atlantic slave trade, and how much African culture has influenced the U.S. culture. And meeting him really, growing up in this area, we have a lot of history, and we learn a lot of history, and very fascinating how histories can be painted in so many different ways based upon who's telling them and who has the tools in which to tell them. And meeting him and a friend of his, I just rearranged some thought processes on how to get involved with arts and how arts can transform.
Yes.
Viola Davis. Awards aside, this woman shows up in her work and she pulls back the veil. She has lived, if you've read her memoir, she has lived a tough life, but is not afraid to share it in order for people to understand why we have to show up. And a quote that I have from my professor in college is what I rule my business by is we have to tell of our struggles in order to help other people get through theirs.
One would have to be my first jazz teacher. His name is Tommy Grice. He not only taught me how to play the instrument or learn about jazz, but he taught me how to teach. And at that age of 12 or 13, that was unheard of. But this man was he lived in my neighborhood, and I was his paper boy. So two things I remember, how good of a teacher he was and how good of a tipper he was. So I really enjoyed delivering his papers every day. But his brother, his name is Gigi Grice, who's a much more famous musician. I remember the last time I met with him, and he was talking about his brother. But his brother has a very interesting story if you ever get a chance to look it up. He left music because he was ran out because he wanted to get into publishing, but he had forces that ran him out of music, and he stopped playing music in the 60s. But Tommy Grice was probably the one person that influenced me and encouraged me to play music and teach as well.
Yeah, and for me, I would say it has to be an artist, is a Japanese-American artist, Isamu Neguchi. The reason that I gravitate to his work is just because he was able to really navigate through a difficult time in America, being a foreign, basically, and was able to leave a very important legacy connecting his culture from Japan and his experience in America. So for me, that's one of the artists that I look at.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. Can we give our panel a hand, please? And you guys just hang out while I wrap up. But I do want to just express our sincere and deep gratitude for you all showing up here today. Some of the things that we've heard all throughout the day is how art transforms lives. And I remember when I was a 4th grader going to inner city school in Pennsylvania, and I was taken on a field trip to the symphony orchestra. And it was the first time I had ever heard symphony orchestra music. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. And then I wanted to play the flute. And so I begged my mother if I could play the flute. And so she got me into the program where I could play the flute. She couldn't afford to buy a flute, so she had to rent the flute. And I remember getting that flute in this little black case, and then when I opened it up, it was like in this crushed velvet, it was all nice and pretty and everything. And unfortunately, I couldn't play it. I would get lightheaded when I tried to play. And I tried, and we tried everything, and the teacher tried to give me breathing exercises, and I would still get lightheaded. And so I agreed to take piano lessons instead, and singing and all of that, and I still can't really play. I can read music, and I can pluck out some stuff, but I just remember how important that was to me as a 4th grade kid. And then in 2018, I had the opportunity to go to Sydney, Australia. I went to the Sydney Opera House, and I got to hear the orchestra there. And it took me back to 4th grade, and I got that same feeling. But the only thing that kind of upsets me about the whole flute thing is I should have been Lizzo before Lizzo. But it transforms lives, it connects us, it brings us together. I appreciate your participation, your engagement. If you were a speaker, we just want to thank you so, so very much for being here today. And with that, do you want to say something? Let April say something. Okay.
I too want to thank you all for being here. You make this a success with your presence, so thank you. I'd like to thank Chesapeake Arts Center and their staff. They've worked so hard to make this happen and keep everything rolling all day. So thank you to all of you guys out there that have worked so hard, and thank you to Angela for being our moderator. We look forward to next year. People are already asking, so we'll start working and thinking about next year, and it's going to be hard to outdo this year, but our panelists have been great and all of our speakers. Thank you.